All right, so we've got the controllers in. Now it's time to actually hook them up and make them function here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn off the model because I only need it on so I can position them. Now what we're going to do is make the pieces that go there. Okay, so I need to make a null group. So to do that, we're going to hit Control G. Basically, I want this. What I need to have happen is I need this thing to be the same orientation as this. Okay, so so we're going to have to try and do that through a couple of ways. So, well, through a singular way. So if I wanted, let's say, a controller, just so you get the idea of how this works. Here we go. So let's say we have this controller, okay? And let's say I want it to be the same orientation as this controller here, right? Okay. So if you look, you can see the positioning of that. See the positioning of this one, right? They're not the same. See that one? The X is going that way. This one, X is going that way. Okay. So what I could do is you could rotate it in such a way that it is the same orientation. So if you select this one and I select this one, they're pretty similar. Okay. And if I want to make it even more exact, I could actually use a constraint. Grab this, and then we go constraint, and I do orient, make sure maintain offsets off, and hit add. And now you'll see if I have this selected and I have this selected, see how they're the same general orientation. Okay. So that would seem great, but the problem is with that is that now look at all these dirty values, right? So I could get rid of that constraint. So that's not on there anymore. So it doesn't have the blue. But see how there's all these zero out values. So how do we clear these out? We do modify freeze transformations. But what do you notice? It inherits the world space orientation. Okay. So basically the idea is that there's no way to have this oriented and to also be zero values, you would think, except you could do this instead. You can take this object, right? I could group it, right? So now there's a group that's above it, okay? Let me just take this curve. I'm just going to freeze the transforms so it's nice and zeroed out. Okay, so I have a group above it. Now, if I were to rotate this group, let me center its pivot so you can see it, center pivot. Now, if I were to rotate this group, right, I can rotate it, put it whatever orientation I want. You'll see that the NURBS underneath it is completely zeroed out, and it has that same orientation as the parent. Now, the parent will have these bad orientations because it can see around it. The way to look at this is look at the room that you're in right now, right? If I asked you to point up, could you point up to me? Absolutely, you totally could, okay? Now, the reason why you can do that is because if you look at the room that's around you, right, the object that you are currently contained in, up is clearly the ceiling, okay? However, if I threw you out into space and I asked you to point up, you would not know which way was up, right? You would need to have something that contains you to know which direction is up. So you would either just use the object that's around you or whatever you're in relation to, right? So you would exist in world space then. So if I can put something in a containing box, have that hold the bad values, such as this is, okay, it'll allow this object to have clear values because as far as it's concerned, this group is its world, right? So that's the idea. That's what we want to do. Now, I want these to stay in their current position, so we're actually going to do this a little bit differently. What we're going to do is have nothing selected, hit Control G. It's going to make a null, all right? I'm not going to bother naming all these nulls because it's kind of annoying, but normally I would, but I don't want to spend a bunch of time renaming a bunch of nulls every time. So we're just going to do it like this, okay? So I have that null. It's going to be on origin. It's down here, okay? A null is just an empty group. It's just like in Unity where every object has a transform node. That's what this does. It has a transform node, but nothing else attached to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to point snap it here. So now the null exists there. I want this null to be the same orientation as this joint. So to do that, we're going to use an orient constraint. You're going to need to have the outliner open. So select the object that you want to place a constraint from. So that's going to be this clavicle joint. Then Control, or if you're on a Mac, Command click the null. You're going to have to do it through the outliner because there's nothing to click on in here. So you're going to select this, then the null, then you go to Constraint, and you do Orient, hit the option box, just do Reset Settings, make sure Maintain Offset is checked off, okay? Hit Add. Now what you're going to see is that null now has this orient constraint placed on it, okay? And if I actually select it, you see how these are blue? The reason why that's blue is it basically means there's a connection there. It's not a direct connection. It's it means that there's an orient, or not an orient constraint. It means there's a constraint played. Actually, it tells you right there, constraint, right? So what that means though now is that when I rotate this, you will see that the null will inherit those numbers. And notice that it also rotated. I don't actually want that. So what you want to do is after we've used that orient constraint to shift it into position, I want to go ahead and over here, you're going to have to expand it. You're going to select this, and then you're going to hit delete. Okay? This will still have that orientation because we didn't undo that part. But it's no longer tied to this. Okay? So we now have the null in the same orientation as this joint, which is what I want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this controller, control-click the null, and hit P. You can also, if it's easier for you, you can grab it here, middle mouse button, and just drag it on top of this. That also works, okay? So now, if we look at this null, and you look at this controller, right, you'll see the controller still has that world orientation, but it has these bad values. Watch what happens when I freeze this transforms. Modify, freeze transformations. It's going to zero out, but it inherits its parent's orientation. So the orientation that the parent is in, which I shifted from this, now this controller has the same exact orientation, which means basically that this controller now has 0 values and is in the same rotation as this, the same orientation as the joint itself. Now what I can do is I can connect this controller to this joint. I can use this to now drive that. So what you're going to do is you select the controller, which is going to do the constraining. Then you're going to grab the controller, and then you're going to go constraint, and then you're going to do orient. Okay? Now, when I grab this and I move it, it's going to apply its rotational data onto the rotational data of this. And now we have a FK controller. Okay? Now it's a little confusing because usually when you do parenting, right, you select the child, then the parent, you hit P. When you do a constraint, you grab the constrainer and then the constrainee. All right? Think about what the names are, right? So if you have a child, like let's say there's a kid and he's out in a playground, right? If the parent calls to them, the kid goes to the parent, right? So the kid, then the parent. But if there's the same kids out there and someone needs to get a hold of them and it's not their parent, right? It's the constrainer to the constrainee. All right? So just look at it that way. All right. So we now have one that's working here. So the null will never touch. And the user, the animator, will never see this. This basically holds all of the dirty values, so we don't have to worry about that. This is what they'll interact with, has nice 0 values, and it's in the same orientation as the joint. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to make this for all the arms. It's going to be somewhat annoying. I just wanted to do one first, and then we'll... I'm not going to do each one of them separately. So we're going to do this whole arm, and then we'll do this whole arm, okay? So... first I'm going to do is nothing selected, hit Control G. It's going to make a null group. All right. Make sure you have W for the move tool. I'm going to hold V to point snap. We're going to point snap it right there. All right. I'm just going to go right down the, what do we got? 3 more. So I'm going to have nothing selected, hit Control G. I'm going to hold V, point snap it to the elbow. Nothing. Make sure you have nothing selected, hit Control G, and hold V, and point snap it to the wrist. Okay. So now you have null 1, clavicle. Null 2, shoulder. Null 3, elbow. Null 4 is wrist. Okay? Good. Now what we're going to do is we need each one of these oriented to the corresponding joints. Okay, so I'm going to select this shoulder joint, then control click or command click if you're on a Mac. Select this, then go constraint, orient. Okay? So now you'll see that that is now in the correct orientation, and you'll see a little constraint will pop on that. Okay? I'm going to select this joint, then we're going to select the corresponding null, and then we'll hit G since it was the last thing we did, just to make it a little bit faster. Okay. Then we're going to select the wrist joint, select the corresponding null, and hit G. All right. Now you'll see that all of them, all of these nulls are in the same orientation as the corresponding joints that they're snapped to. Okay. We don't want those constraints, so just go ahead and open all these guys up and select each one of these and delete them. Okay. So now they're still retaining that orientation, but they don't actually have the constraints on them. Now what we want to do is we want to parent the controllers to each one of these nulls. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to hold Control or Command if I'm on a Mac, select that null, and hit P. Okay? Select this controller, select the corresponding null, and hit P. Select this controller, select the corresponding null, and hit P. All right, now you're going to see that once again, they all still have bad values. They were actually zeroed out before because in comparison to the world, they were in the correct orientation. But in comparison to this null group, they are not. So what we're going to do is you're going to grab, you can just grab all three. I'll grab this one, shift click, shift click. So I have all three of these, and we'll just do modify, freeze transformations. Okay, that'll zero them out, and now you'll see all of them will have the same orientation as the joints because they inherited from their parents. Great, almost there. Last thing to do, second to last thing to do is to actually have these do the constraining. Select this controller, shift click on the joint, so the controller, then the joint, constraint, orient. Select the controller, shift click the joint, and then I'm just going to G because it repeats the last action. Select the controller, shift click the joint, and then G. Okay. Now what you're going to see is that when I rotate this, it will thusly rotate that. This one will rotate that. But you will see something weird. If I grab this, it will rotate this up. But notice the wrist stays down because it's based off of this thing's rotation. But it doesn't move up with it because these are not parented to each other. So we're going to parent these to each other. Okay. Now, the way we parent them is kind of important. We need this null parented to this controller, not the null to this null. Okay. So what that means is it might be easier to do it over here. So you can see here's the clavicle, shoulder, elbow, and wrist. Okay. I'm going to take the shoulder, middle mouse button. I'm just going to drag it to this clavicle controller. And then if I expand this and expand, you can see, okay, this null is going to go to this controller. Boom. And I'm going to expand it so I can see, okay? Take this null and drag it to this controller. Okay, so it should go null, controller, null, controller, null, controller, null, controller. Now, when I rotate this one, these are all parented to it. So when it goes up, the other ones go up. And now you can see we thusly have FK controls, okay? Now, I'm just going to put this on so you can kind of see it in action, right? So now we have these controls, and that's pretty sweet. Okay? And we don't have to worry about the joints. So eventually we'll turn the joints off, like the visibility of them. So the animator never has to actually see the rig itself. We just want them to see the controllers. All right. So that looks acceptable. All right. So great. Let's go ahead and save that. And we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it on the other side. I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to do a little bit faster this time, just so that we can kind of get it done. So I'm going to minimize this. All right. So we're going to have nothing selected and hit Control G, and I'm going to hold V, and we're going to W, V. We're going to point snap it there. Have nothing selected. Make sure you click off Control G, hold V, point snap there. Nothing selected. Control G, hold V, point snap there. Nothing selected. Control G, hold V, point snap there. Okay, so we have 5, 6, 7, and 8 nulls now. All right, so you can see this would be easier if they were all named, but again, I just don't feel like renaming everything. Okay, so we have all of our nulls. Now we need to make them all the same orientation as the joints. So I'm going to select this joint. I'm going to select the corresponding null that's right there, constraint, and orient. Okay, and we're just going to do the same thing. Select this, select the corresponding null, G. Select this, select the corresponding null, G. Select this, select the corresponding null, G. Now we need to delete all of the, I'm going to select all these, hit the expand button. Oh, I thought it would expand them all. You can like right click and then, where are you? Show, there should be like expand. I don't know. Thought there was an expand. I need to take all these constraints and we just need to delete them. So I'm just going to select all of these and delete. Okay. So we got all of the orient constraints actually gone. Now what we're going to do is we are going to parent the controllers to the corresponding nulls. Grab this guy, select this null, and P. Okay. So I take this controller, parent it to that null. Take this controller, go to this null and P. Select this controller, go to this null and P. Select this controller, control click or command click, and P. Okay. Now you're going to see that all of them have terrible values. So we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to select this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Why not do them all at the same time? Go modify, freeze transformations. They will now inherit the transformate or the orientations of their parents. And now they got clean values, which are now the same as the joints that that they're going to control, so that they won't flip out. All right, now we're just going to actually have these apply to the controllers or to the joints. Select the controller, shift click on the joint, and go constraint, orient. Okay. Make sure that when you do this, I'm going to show you something. Select this, shift click on this, and then I'll hit G. Now make sure you don't rotate here because it's going to flip out. Watch what ends up happening. I'm going to save this real quick. Watch what's going to happen. So the reason why that's happening is we're getting a double transform. So what's happening is this controller, when I rotate it, rotates this joint. But if I rotate this joint, and because I had these both selected, I am both rotating the joint and this thing's rotating. So you're getting a double transformation, and it ends up being all weird. Okay, so that one's hooked up though, right? Yeah, okay. So select this, shift click this, G, right? Because last thing we did was that. Select this, select the corresponding joint, and G. All right, so now all the controllers are functioning, but they're not in the correct parenting group. So we're just going to go ahead and we are going to parent them. So I want to take this null. So you can see the names here, right? So this is the shoulder. It goes underneath this. So we're going to take this null, middle mouse button, click and dragging, drop it in. I'm going to expand this to make it a little bit easier. Select this guy, middle mouse click and drag. There, good, expand. All right, and then one last one. This guy goes to this controller and expand. Didn't actually have to expand it. And I'm just going to collapse the whole thing. So now you can see that this will move the whole arm and we are good, okay? Or if this one moves this, okay? So that looks pretty good. That is the arms now, more or less rigged. There's some other things that we need to do. I want to get the head and the jaw also done. We'll do that in the next video, all right? But you get kind of the basic concept. Hopefully that was okay.